Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to News Aplenty. I'm your host, Sam. This is my co host, Bailey, and we've also got Charlie back here with us. How are you, Charlie?
Good, thank you, Sam. It's a pleasure to be back on once again. Good to see you as well, Bailey.
Good to see you, Charlie.
Yeah, we'd like you to welcome back to our second show here in the studio at La Trobe University. It's good to see everyone outside enjoying their lunch today. And
Maybe not. They've flocked
There's
out.
no one there.
They've flocked out. They've taken all the Charlie's kebabs and they've gone home, which is all right. I mean, fair enough. Charlie's kebabs, world famous, by the way.
And we're in week 7 here at uni with our mid-semester break coming up soon. What are you guys doing for the Easter
Mid-semester
holidays?
break. Well, I'm going to be in God country, camping, King Valley. Never been before, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah,
How
I'm
about
going
you, Sam?
camping too,
Nah, really?
down the Otways. Charlie, camping?
Altways.
Nah, not quite, unfortunately. We're going to go to 6 games of footy, which has ranged from Good Friday until Easter Monday. Speaking about sport, we have a lot of sport coming up in this instalment. We had the AFLW Grand Final, as well as the Masters. And in addition, round 4 of the AFL season, as well as the round 5 of the NRL season, have both concluded. But there'll be more to it in sport.
Thanks for that, Charlie. So, Bailey, let's get into it. What do we have on for the show today?
Strap your seatbelts in, Sam. It's a political theme today. As you may have heard, an election date was set yesterday, and we're going to be looking into election advertising laws before they come up all over our TVs. We're going to be looking in depth into the government's new anti-trolling laws, the importance of and the importance of heart health and health checks, and how the aviation transportation industry is coping with travel up and running again. Charlie will be back later on with a wrap on a massive weekend of sport as well. But first, we'll get into the latest news headlines.
Prime Minister Scott Morrison has announced the federal election will be on May 21st. Morrison will be facing off against Labor's leader, Anthony Albanese. Labor is ahead in the opinion polls, but people are still trying to figure out who Albanese is and what he stands for. However, one thing is for certain. Many Australians don't trust our current Prime Minister due to the way he has handled certain situations, such as natural disasters and the COVID rollout, as well as the murkiness for pre-selection 15 years ago.
Shortly after Morrison's announcement of the election date, Albanese made his opening pitch to voters in front of the press, urging that Australians deserve a better future. In a wide-ranging speech, the leader of the opposition pledged to provide cheaper childcare, greater investment in renewable energies, and the establishment of an anti-corruption commission. At the time of the announcement, Albanese was attending the Royal Easter Show in Sydney.
UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson walks the street of Kyiv as he made a surprise visit to Ukraine's capital. To show his support for Ukraine, he has pledged $130 million, as well as promising that Britain will provide 120 armoured vehicles and missile systems to the military.
As Australia's election date was set, the French election for president is heating up between current leader Emmanuel Macron and opposition leader Marine Le Pen. According to initial projected first-round voting, Macron holds a small lead and, according to online polls, is the favourite to retain his presidency. It's been 2 decades since a French president has won a second term in office.
Australian rock band The Saints lead singer Chris Bailey has sadly passed away this morning. Bailey was only 65 years old as the band announced the news in a statement post via social media. The Saints originated in Brisbane in 1973 and became the first punk band outside of the US to release a record. No cause of death has been revealed as of yet.
It's been revealed that former Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan threatened to implement martial law before being ousted out of office on Saturday. According to security officials and opposition figures, Khan tried several times to hold on to his power and days and hours before his no-confidence vote, but ultimately failed and was ousted from office, bringing an end to his 4-year reign.
Former NRL champion James Maloney has reportedly tested positive for a drug for a drug that is for a banned substance while playing in France. The case is reportedly yet to be processed by France's anti-doping agency, and his B sample is yet to be tested. The 35-year-old failed a routine drug test following a game in the Elite One Championship.
And American Scotty Scheffler is now a major champion, winning the US Masters this morning. Scheffler had a 3-shot lead overnight from Australian Cameron Smith, who was hot on the American's tail until he found the water on the 12th hole. Smith later had to settle for third, while Rory McIlroy finished second. Gee, I'm still flat about that, Sam, to be honest.
Can't say I'm interested in golf very much, but yes, sorry about that one, Bailey. But yes, now on to our lead story. The federal election was only called yesterday, yet we've been seeing United Australia Party advertising everywhere for months. Our reporters Nick and Taylor look into the United Australia's Party and find out what are the election advertising laws we have in Australia.
Unless you've been living under the Titanic too for the last 6 months, you would have realised that there's a federal election coming up in just a few weeks. You would have also no doubt seen the relentless campaign advertisement by the Clive Palmer's United Australia Party.
Zero emissions, zero jobs and zero future. Thanks for zero, ScoMo and Albo. Join the United Australia Party.
Estimates say that in the 2019 federal election, the United Australia Party spent big, $80 million big. The party recently also announced that they're ready and willing to go further this federal election, spending even more than they did in 2019.
Dr. Andrea Carson is an Associate Professor in Journalism at La Trobe University. She suggests that Clive Palmer isn't just spending money to try and win seats, but to gain influence.
By having that prominent campaign, he got a lot of media attention, and he was also able to deal himself in with the major parties to ensure that he was there swapping preferences when it came to the preference trading that the political parties do, and that gives him influence.
Graham Orr, a law professor at Queensland University, agrees that Palmer's aim is not just to gain seats.
Clearly what Mr Palmer has done this time, well, he's now sitting at 4 or 5%, so he started early and he's outflanked some of these other you might call right-wing or even right-wing libertarian parties, like One Nation, like the Liberal Democrat or Liberty and Democracy Party, like the Anti-Vaxxer Party. So he's got to march on them, and he's become, I guess, the major minor party this time round. Secondly, he's just distorted the agenda. We're all talking about Clive Palmer and freedom, 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 even though we've been out of lockdowns for many, many, many months. So, I think it's more than an ego thing for Mr Palmer, but that's part of it.
Palmer's big campaign budget has brought into question the election laws we have in Australia and whether they're fit for purpose.
If we just think about the upcoming national election, there aren't a lot of laws. There are very few laws about information as such, because we're sort of, fairly liberal democracy. And, there's a big debate about fake news and misinformation. So you can kind of say anything you like as long as you don't do what journalists never do, which is defame people. But that's about attacking individuals falsely. And most of our elections are about parties and policies more than individuals. The only other thing you can't do is mislead voters about basic stuff like what day the election is or how do you cast a valid vote. So there's no laws about truth in political advertising at the national election, so you can kind of make all sorts of claims about your opponent's policies and so on.
Laws regarding the information that parties and candidates can use in their campaign advertising and how much they can spend on their campaign are severely lacking.
When it comes to money, what we've seen with Mr Palmer, enormous spending, and he did that the last national election. So, for example, we don't have limits on how much you can spend at our national elections.
Other countries like Canada and the UK do have those limits in place, and so Australia's laws, by comparison, are considered pretty lax.
Politicians campaign hard for the votes of young people, but do the young people of Australia even care what the pollies have to say? Have all the broken promises and dirty politics become too much to bear? We asked a bunch of La Trobe University students what was going to sway their vote at the next upcoming elections.
Just no Labor or Liberal. Honestly, or Green, so no one.
I can't vote, I'm a Q.
Oh yeah, she's not even, this is my first time voting, so I don't really know.
Business,
but not Liberal though, I know that. No Liberal, and then no.
But I do
What's
influence my
Pauline
little
Hanson's
brothers.
party?
Who can vote.
Your brothers can vote.
They vote for me.
Yeah.
Vote for me this year.
No Pauline Hanson.
I think we need someone who, first of all, isn't trying to make us pay for rapid tests.
I don't know. I need to look into more politics. I haven't had to vote yet because I'm freshly 18. So I definitely need to do my politics research, I guess.
I don't know, honestly. No idea.
Probably mainly like.
I don't know. I'm sorry. I'd say climate change. And yeah, what the benefits will be for working class people.
I'll be honest, I'm not into that or like the politics stuff. I'm just like, yeah, I'm just not really into it, so I can't give you a proper answer. Education, probably, yeah, education, corruption, foreign policy, and those are probably the three biggest things, at least that come to mind right now.
Take it seriously. Remember that whoever gets into government, gets the majority of the lower house seats, they get to determine policy. They get to shape the direction of the country. So while it might be fun to do it, think about not voting sensibly by not filling out the paper properly, you're denying yourself that opportunity to have a say in who gets to govern the country.
Thank you for that story, Nick and Taylor. Andrea also has her own podcast called Below the Line. It unpacks party lines and policies during the 2022 Australian election campaign. Seems like it will be a very interesting topic with lots of conversations, so feel free to check it out and give it a listen.
With heart-related deaths and health issues on the rise since the pandemic, reporter Lewis Phillips brings awareness to cardiovascular health and the importance of heart health checks.
After the recent deaths of public figures Shane Warne and Kimberley Kitching, both to suspected heart attacks, Australians are urged by medical experts to be on top of their heart health now that the pandemic has eased. Shane Warne died of a suspected heart attack at the age of 52 while holidaying overseas in Thailand. Kimberley Kitching, a Victorian Labor senator, also aged 52, died of a suspected heart attack after pulling over while driving her car.
This is a completely avoidable disease and nobody should be dropping dead on their bike at the age of 55.
An estimated 27,000 Australians are likely to have missed out on early detection of heart attack and stroke risk during the pandemic. Research from the Heart Foundation shows that people with heart disease or those at a high risk of heart disease were more likely to have missed or delayed a GP appointment during the height of the pandemic.
It's the people who are a little older, who may have a risk factor. They may be overweight, they may be a smoker, they may have a bit of blood pressure or a bit of cholesterol.
2.1 million Australians are living with heart disease, with more than 500,000 of those skipping potentially life-saving checkups during the pandemic. 1 in 5 people in the high-risk category said they were unlikely to attend future GP appointments because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Heart Foundation General Manager of Health, Bill Stavresky, urged Australians to not let the pandemic stop them from heart health checks, whether it be in person with a GP or using the telehealth services.
We have 1.5 million Australians who are at high risk. So that means they're at high risk of having a heart attack or stroke in the next 5 years.
Experts suggest that an increase in poor eating habits during the pandemic may have led to high cholesterol and high blood pressure going unchecked. Heart health experts and general practitioners warn Australians to be on the lookout for the warning signs of a heart attack and heart disease. The Heart Foundation of Australia's Heart Week program is a national campaign held in the first week of May each year, with its aim to put a spotlight on Australia's leading cause of death. The most common symptom is chest pain, which can spread to your arms, neck, jaw, or back. Other symptoms include dizziness, lightheadedness, feeling faint or anxious, nausea, indigestion, vomiting, shortness of breath or difficulty breathing, sweating, or a cold sweat. This is Lewis Phillips for News Aplenty.
Thanks, Lewis, for that important story. Online trolling is when someone makes a deliberately provocative comment or post and waits for people to take the bait. Following the proposed social media anti-trolling bill announced by the government, many found controversies as the bill goes against the defamatory laws rather than tackling online abuse. Alyssa Sabele has more.
Tech giants may soon be held accountable for defamatory content posted on their platforms following the anti-trolling bill proposed by the Morrison government last year. The new Social Media Bill 2022 was announced in December and drafted in February. It is aimed to increase control against online abuse by asking social media companies to identify people behind anonymous accounts. Prime Minister Scott Morrison says he wants to close the gap between real life and discourse online.
But most importantly, making sure that the rules that exist in the real world must exist in the digital and online world.
The new established framework for end users' information discourse orders will allow victims to obtain information from social media companies such as country location, data, and contact details for alleged perpetrators to proceed with defamation case. CEO of the Online Hate Prevention Institute, Dr. Andre Obler, says there needs to be a legal response, but other approaches could have been considered.
There needs to be a legal response. There's a gap in the law. Defamation is not always the best way to deal with these things, but it is a legal approach that currently exists. If the government wants a legal approach, maybe a better approach would be to create another law that specifically deals with trolling, rather than trying to tweak things around defamation law.
E-Safety Commissioner Julie Inman-Grant also criticised that the new social media bill, she says the push to unmask vicious online trolls is at risk of creating confusion that could counterfeit its effectiveness in tracking online abuse. In a press release, Inman-Grant says the bill contained conflation, confusion, and the oversimplification of complex technical and legal challenges. The government online safety watchdog also argued that actual legalization deals with more defamation laws than online abuse, saying the defamation laws were developed for the print age, not the digital age, and cannot keep pace with the velocity and volume of the social media commentary. Without knowing the perpetrator's identity, the defamation path becomes ineffective. But Dr. Obler says a lot of the law also deals with shielding and protection for the social media users and companies if they take the step of disclosing the perpetrator's identity. He says that the Senate Standing Committee on Legal and Constitutional Affairs has recommended to change the social media bill.
One of the ideas in the bill is that a social media company should ask a person's permission before disclosing their identity. And if the person doesn't agree, then they can only disclose it based on a court order. On a similar basis, the bill says that the company should only take down the person's defamatory statements if the person that posted them agrees. And the committee turned around and said, but the companies can take down anything they like, which they do all the time. Why should we suddenly say they can't take down harmful statements unless the poster agrees, right? This is giving the harm more protection rather than, creating a solution. So the committee suggests that bit be amended.
Another issue that Dr. Obler highlights is the bill refers to Australian citizens and applies only to people who have permanent visas. It will mean the bill will not protect people who are against trolling, like an international student living in Australia, who would not be able to use the law because they are explicitly excluded from it. The second major gap that Dr. Obler explains is the removal of the content mentioned in the bill.
If we look at the Online Safety Act, removal means that no person in Australia can see it. So this is actually removal for defamation is a much stronger standard, and it's saying it's got to be taken down completely. Whereas if it's cyberbullying material attacking a child or attacking an adult in Australia, the company could just block viewing it in Australia and leave it online.
Dr. Obler believes that rather than just handing over the people's identities whenever someone makes an allegation, there does need to be some primary steps to see if there's some legitimacy to it.
Maybe an agency like that should be playing a role to say, okay, let's do a preliminary assessment of this complaint. Let's look at the content. Let's decide if this is a legitimate case of trolling. Is the correct solution simply ordering that the material be removed? Which if it was just added into the E-Safety Act, there was a whole mechanism for removing content, and that could be the end of it.
Ahead of the elections, the Morrison government is expected to support the proposed social media bill. Alyssa Sabele reporting from News Aplenty.
Thank you, Alyssa. After 2 years of treacherous lockdowns, where unfortunately many Victorians were unable to travel due to the COVID pandemic, the aviation industry has finally opened its doors to the public once again. Ramil has the story.
Throughout the past 2 years, Victoria has been hit with one of the strictest lockdowns in the world, and the tourism and aviation industry has been one of the hardest areas hit. Many facets of the industry have taken rough financial hits, with airlines struggling to make ends meet. But as restrictions start easing throughout Victoria, thousands of customers are now looking forward to travelling once again, and we are seeing a major influx of people flocking to airports to get away. This welcoming influx spans right across the industry, with external businesses to the airport now picking themselves back up after an extremely difficult 2 years. Adam Wilson is the Group Business Manager for Busy Beaver, a small airport parking business located in Tullamarine. He has seen the drastic change firsthand and explains that it is encouraging to have customers return to the establishment, but also understands that the process to get back has been extremely tricky.
It hasn't been easy, be fair to say. Look, on a personal level, it's like everybody else on the planet. It's a difficult thing to have a pandemic land and turn your life upside down. And you know, in an airport parking business where nobody was allowed to travel, you know, our businesses and our jobs were really on the line. So from a business sense, finding ways to create secondary revenue streams, look, working in closely with the staff to offer shifts where we can, making sure that all the government incentives we could get our hands on, we got.
Although the aviation industry is making a move towards improvement, there are some aspects of Busy Beaver that are still recovering. According to Melbourne Airport's monthly passenger performance report for January of this year, there has been a significant 91% growth travelling customers. This statistic is almost a certainty given that there have been little to no customers compared to the time last year, but it depicts how eager people are to leave the country. Dr. Zheng Li is currently the chair of the Department of Aviation within the Faculty of Science, Engineering and Technology at Swinburne University. He believes that although the aviation industry is vastly improving, there is more work that has to be done in order for the financial sector to come back to normal.
I think the passenger numbers will continue to grow. Okay, when you cited the general figure, possibly because the base was too low, so that's why they got quite big improvement. Because during pandemic, there were just only a couple of flights a day to Melbourne Airport. So I think that's they're going well. I think in terms of the financial situation, apparently that have we now gone through the most difficult, challenging period. I think we are improve, when passenger numbers increase.
This is Ramil Zimmerlin reporting for News Aplenty.
Thanks for that, Ramil. Sam, have you been travelling recently?
Not as of yet, but I will be in June. I'm heading over to the US, which I'm very excited for, going over for the World Lacrosse Championships.
Must be nice.
Yep. And what about you? Heading anywhere?
Nothing exciting. Just up to Darwin, I think, see family, fishing. Important stuff.
Charlie, what about you?
So I'm going to the UK in December to see my extended family. I'm buzzing for it.
Yeah, that's exciting. What part of the UK?
Look, there's a bit of Wakenham, a bit of Taunton, there's a bit of Harpenden in the heartland of London.
Love it.
You have it.
Exciting. All right, now that we have you, let's hear what you have to say about the huge sport weekend we just had.
It certainly was huge. Thank you, Sam. It's safe to say it was one of the most exhilarating weekends in the sporting calendar. The jam-packed weekend was headlined by the return of a Formula One Grand Prix at Albert Park, marking the first return of the event back there in 3 years. It was a 24-year-old Monacan driver, Charles Leclerc, who came away with the F1 title in the heart of Melbourne yesterday, winning the main race by 20 seconds. To the AFLW, and the Adelaide Crows have produced more silverware, taking out their third AFLW premiership defeating Melbourne, led by skipper Daisy Pearce, by 13 points at the Adelaide Oval on Saturday. Touching base with UFC now, an Australian mixed martial artist, Alexander Volkanovski, retains his featherweight title, knocking out the South Korean Chain Sung-jung, known as a Korean zombie, in 4 rounds. The 33-year-old from New South Wales has now won his last 11 fights, keeping his unbeaten UFC record intact. To the AFL action from round 4, and the reigning premiers Melbourne continue on their merry way, being the only unbeaten side so far, making it 4 wins from 4. The Demons' 32-point win over the winless Port Adelaide has sent a message to the rest of the competition as for who the benchmark is. To the other games, Essendon defeated Adelaide Crows by 4 points yesterday to claim their first win of the season, while Gold Coast stopped a Carlton outfit from continuing their unbeaten streak as the Suns knocked off Michael Voss's side by 5 goals. And across to the NRL, and 5 weeks in, unlike the AFL, the reigning premiers in the Penrith Panthers remain as the only unbeaten side in the league, making it 5 wins from 5. Their 20-point win over the Bulldogs away from home yesterday solidifies their commanding form in the competition. Back to our stories now. With more public attention on women's sport than ever before, research gaps have been exposed, especially in the effects of the menstrual cycle and how the conversations around them can be often uncomfortable for some. Bailey Zimmerman has the story.
In the past, an athlete's period was merely something to be endured, usually in an uncomfortable silence. But the rise of women's sport in recent years has highlighted these important research gaps in exercise science, and the stigma for something that is not often publicly spoken about. A female's menstrual cycle has been shown to affect an athlete's heart rate and temperatures when exercising, which can lead to a greater risk of injury. So far, sporting organisations have struggled to give a comfortable environment for athletes to talk about their personal effects of their menstrual cycles. Anthea Clark, an exercise sports scientist with expertise in this area, believes that there needs to be more education given to all levels of sporting organisations in women's sport.
The big thing about the menstrual cycle is that it's unique to each athlete. So my experience of my menstrual cycle is going to be very different to someone else's experience. You could have symptoms of how you're feeling, whether you're feeling bloated, whether you've got mood or disturbances like that. I don't think there's enough education for anyone about the menstrual cycle, whether that be our athletes, male or female coaches. If we can improve that education, it's going to improve the experience for our female athletes, absolutely, and more needs to be done. Yeah.
While cyclist Steph Hibbert takes birth control to negate the symptoms of her menstrual cycle, she finds it rare that the topic of menstrual cycles ever come up within her sport, and believes the discomfort comes from social norms and a lack of education for athletes.
Yeah, I haven't heard it being talked about while training or while racing. Obviously, there are lots of males in cycling, so that could play a part in it. But I also, the girls who I ride with as well, it's not something that comes up. I've never heard it being spoken about in cycling at all. I think if girls are affected by menstrual symptoms, then there are definitely medications and technologies out there today that they have access to, which would be great if they knew all their options.
Campaigns such as I'm an Athlete, period, and the Smarter campaign has brought some form of awareness of the performance effects of the menstrual cycle among athletes. But researchers such as Dr. Clark are continuing to break new grounds and aspire to improve how menstrual cycles are looked upon within sport.
Not only do we need to understand more about female athletes' experiences around the menstrual cycle and what changes in terms of performance and training, but also how do we improve the implementation of some of that menstrual cycle monitoring? Do we need to add in more education specific to athletes, specific to coaches, and how we can integrate those together?
Bailey Zimmerman for News Aplenty.
Thanks, Bailey, for that amazing report on that story. I think it's a very important topic that needs to be spoken about, and especially being a female in the athletic world, I know it's something that's, needs to be worked on. And Steph said it pretty well, being in a dominant sport and not being able to really talk about it. So, good work there. And Charlie, thanks for that loaded sport segment. I heard that Hawks and St Kilda.
Oh, I had the time of my life at the MCG yesterday. It was great. Absolutely obliterated them.
I loved the Formula One. Good race, I thought.
All right, so Bailey, it's been an exciting second show once again, full of politics and sports. But what I'm looking forward to is Easter this week, having a bit of a break.
Got a favourite chocolate, Sam?
Ooh, good question. I'd say Cadbury Easter Bunny, just plain, the plain
Just
one.
plain. Bit boring.
So hopefully the Easter Bunny comes. And that's all for our program today. Follow us on Twitter at Upstart Magazine, Instagram at News Aplenty, and Facebook at Upstart Magazine to keep you updated on our show. Tune in next time to hear plenty of news from News Aplenty.